guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to showcase one of the workhorses of my shop, and that would be this guy right here. That's the DW734 thickness planer. I've had this one for a very long time, and really I haven't had an ounce of trouble with it since the day I bought it. But to be quite honest, if the blades aren't sharp on this baby, she ain't doing squat for you. You can do nothing but burn up your wood. If the blades are chipped, you won't get even cuts, and you're just making it work unnecessarily hard if the blades are dull. So on today's show, I'm going to show you guys who are lucky enough to have the 734 how to go about changing your blades. So the very first thing that you want to do before you even start thinking about changing these blades, you guys have heard me say it a million times, I could never say it enough. Please guys, unplug the tool. You don't want your fingers in there. This baby will take no prisoners if she starts up and your fingers are inside the blade housing. The next thing you want to do is you want to get rid of this dust hood. And it's easily enough done with the removal of 3 screws. They're a Phillips head screw. There is one right about here. There's another one on the other side, and there's one at the bottom that goes in through into your dust chute housing. So remove those 3 screws, and once you get them out, the hood just lifts up and off. Now, truth be told, on a regular basis, even when using the planer, I don't have the dust chute connected with the screws. In fact, there's these little clips here that I have found will hold it sufficiently with your dust collection on. And you just push it in and click it down, and that'll hold on there pretty good to collect the dust as it's coming out through into your separator. So really, I haven't had these screws in here for years. Now that we've got our dust collection hood removed, we have this area exposed, but we need to expose the blades. And for this particular unit, the blades are underneath this housing here. And DeWalt's been nice enough to provide us with the proper size T-wrench to use. You can see mine's kind of dusty there, but you use the T-wrench supplied to remove this particular hex head bolt and this hex head bolt. So they're fairly easy to remove. They may be a little tight from being on there for a few years, but you want to use your hex key and remove both of those bolts to be able to remove this hood to expose your blade housings. So the 2 hex bolts have been removed, and now we need to remove this particular section of the hood, and it just lifts up and out. You might want to take the opportunity now that you have this apart to see if you can get in here and clean up some of the gunk that may be in there. Sometimes grease can get in there, there's old sawdust. Just clean it up and make sure that you have clear passages all the way through here. I have quite a bit of residue built up here on these blades that I can see. So I'm going to get in here with a brush and just clean those up a bit. Okay, I've brought in a little bit of a spotlight so we can see in here just a little better. Just as a tip for you guys, whenever I put in new blades, I always write here in a little Sharpie, this says new, changed on March the 27th, 2011, still reversible. So it was changed that long ago. This edge here is quite dull, and however, because I've written this here and it was so long ago that I changed the blades, this reminds me that these are reversible, so now I can still use the other side. So I'll use a little bit of rubbing alcohol and I'll take that off and I'll rewrite the note on here that it was reversed on today's date and that I now need new blades, or I need to send these out for honing. Anyway, we've got this ready to go to take the blade out. However, we can't get the T-wrench into these bolts up here to get the blade out. The spindle is locked, and as soon as you take off the blade hood, it releases a mechanism over on this side over here which locks that blade into place. And what you need to do is reach in there with your fingers and you need to push this down to release the blade so that you can spin it in order to access these hex bolts right here. And we're going to go ahead and release and remove all of these hex bolts. There's 8 of them across that hold the blade in. So with the supplied wrench, we're going to take all of those out. We've got all 8 of the hex bolts removed, and with the DeWalt tool that's supplied, it has 2 rare earth magnets in here, and you can just snap those onto that housing and pull the housing out. Now, keep in mind the orientation, so don't go flipping it around. Just put it back on your in-feed table, or sorry, in this case your out-feed table, and we've now exposed the blade. Let me warn you here, this thing is sharp, especially the edge that has not been exposed. So snap that wrench on there. Now, this is where you want to do this all in one fell swoop. Take your blade out, turn it. In this case, we are reversing the blade, so we would only want to turn it the 180 degrees, and then we're going to put it back in. Carefully place it. There's tabs here that hold it in place. Now this will line your blade up perfectly. There's no messing around with it. There's no mucking around. The only difference between what I'm doing and what you might be doing is if you're replacing the blade, of course, you would take that blade out and discard it and install the new blade. And now at this point in time, we have our new blade reversed. We'll take our blade keeper and we're just going to place this in here where she goes, and we are going to replace all 8 of our hex bolts. So with the hex bolts, just finger tight to start with. Just get them started in there. You don't have to really crank them down. And the beautiful thing about this 734, and with most of these planer setups, is that the blade itself and the blade keeper have slots that align the blade for you. So there's no real calibration that needs to be done at this point. If you are having problems with the blade and the way it was cutting, then you could start messing around with the alignment and whatnot. But that's a video in itself. So for now, go through and finger tight all of these hex bolts and then give them a little bit of a torque, and then we're going to move on to the next blade. For these hex bolts, you don't need to crank and reef on them. They don't have to be like 200 pounds of torque on these bolts. You just want to snug them up and make sure that they're all tight. And then you're going to move on to the next one. And with that, again, watching now, because you have a sharp blade here, release the catch, as I pointed out to you earlier, and then rotate this blade around until you have exposed the second blade. And then we'll go in and just repeat the procedure. Remove these, use your T-wrench, pull the guard, pull the blade, rotate 180, and rebolt her back together. And of course, the 734 is a 3-blade system, so one more time, guys, release the catch, carefully spin the blade until you've exposed those hex bolts, and repeat the process. And of course, just going to write here that we've reversed it on today's date, and that way I know now the next time I will require new blades. Alright, so with that little note written in there, at this point in time now, we want to put our housing back together. And this here, when you're putting the housing, you may have a problem getting it to fit. You're going to see it doesn't go in all the way. That's because of this lock catch mechanism here. The reason that's there is to prevent this thing from spinning should you be silly enough to not unplug it. So when you put in this housing, you need to push down on that lock and then slide your housing in and then replace your 2 hex bolts to seal the whole unit back together. And there you have it. So for all you lucky guys out there that have one of these DW734 planers, that's how you're going to go about changing your blades. If you're having feed problems, you of course want to start off with trying to clean your infeed rollers first, but don't discount dull blades as being part of your problem as well. A dull blade can really hinder the feed on one of these planers. So guys, thanks for watching. Keep your blades sharp, and I will see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.